Excellent. I believe we're on air. So, welcome, David. And
Hello.
this is episode 78 of Tech Talk Live. We're going to talk about shared development best practices. And this is our first Tech Talk Live in the post Jeff era. Jeff is enjoying his going back to his consulting company. He did. Looks like he's in our IRC. He's joined us and he's been active in the Alfresco community. But I was talking to him the other day, and it sounds like he's enjoying working on an AWS project. So picking up some new technologies and having lots of fun. So, but today is David and I, and we are excited to have Tech Talk Live. So this specific session came up because Dave and I were talking about his summit presentations about Share, and Dave suggested that maybe he should do Tech Talk Live to get people up to speed on Share best practices, so that when Summit comes out, at Summit he can discuss what's new in 5.0. So I guess I should mention, if you haven't seen Community Edition 5.0a, it is available. It's got a lot of new features. The search ones that got me most excited. What's your favorite 5.0 your favorite 5.0 feature, Dave?
Well, there's got to be the search. I mean, I'm going to be talking a lot about that today. That's kind of my case study as part of the session. But yeah, the search stuff I think is it's been a long time coming, but it's really good, and I think and there's plenty more to come. I think if you've only seen what's in 5.0a, then there's still more to come. That's just a little taster, really.
Yeah, it is definitely our first 5.0 release. It's an early
Yeah.
version. So Dave and I were talking about, sometimes people get frustrated at the first versions of a new release being a little raw, but you got to choose. You can have fresh off the presses, or you can have really, really well tested, and this one's definitely fresh off the presses.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
think I will say actually, I think it's better, because of the way we're doing development now. It is as with previous community releases, it has been a bit raw in the testing, but we're actually doing much more testing as we go because of the cloud releases. So I think that 5.0a is actually a pretty stable release in terms of the features, much more so than previous, like 4.2a and things like that. So it's just that there's going to be more features coming, I think. So that's a slightly different approach to community releases than we've had before.
yeah, that's very true. And thanks for the clarification. So 5.0a community is available. We're hoping for 5.0 Enterprise Edition to be making significant progress, and we're going to discuss it quite a bit at Summit. Summit is in San Francisco on September 23rd through the 25th. It's in London, October 7th through 9th, and we're going to discuss a lot of stuff about 5.0 and about what's coming after that. And one of those big things, of course, is the new Share Development Framework, and so that's why we have Dave on today. So we don't really have any announcements or anything besides Summit. If in case anybody asks, I believe I've responded to everybody who submitted a session proposal for Summit. So if you did not get an email, please let me know and I will correct that. But we've sent out all those invites and we've updated the schedule with the people who have responded. So today we're going to prepare you for Summit. Everybody in IRC and everybody who's watching the broadcast, we're going to get you ready because Dave's going to bring you up to speed on Share, and then when you get to Summit, you'll be able to dive right in. So that's the vision.
Yeah.
So Dave, I know you prepared a couple of slides, a little bit of background. So when Dave advertised this session, he discussed that there's a blog post worth reading that is on Aikau. How do you say it?
Aikau is one of the first things I mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great name. It's a classic surf and rescue guy in Hawaii. So the blog post kind of introduces it. Another useful post we're going to put in the show notes. Ole from Denmark, he has put together a GitHub tutorial. It's posted on GitHub, but it's a tutorial on Share development in 4.2. And it's a great way to get started with Share, especially on 4.2. I'll put that in the show notes. But it doesn't go into the new stuff. So I'll put that in show notes so people know what state of the art today is. And this episode will serve as an introduction to 5.0 and the future.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, shall I take it away then?
Yes, let's see your screen.
Okay, let's go for this. Right. So hopefully you can all see that okay.
Looking
Okay,
good.
so as I go, if I keep seeing me looking over to the side, I've got IRC running. If I see any questions come up there, then I'll sort of dive in. But hopefully Richard will alert me to anything that comes up, and I'm hoping that if he sees anything that interests him, he'll shout out as well. What I'm going to try and do today is, I know in previous Summit presentations and in blog posts I've covered some of this before, so I'm going to try and do something a little bit different. I'm going to move away from sort of the low-level stuff and try and do a bit more example development. And as Richard was saying, this is really going to sort of trying to whet your appetite for what's coming in 5.0 and what we're going to talk about in greater depth at the Summit sessions. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much into the history. We've covered a lot of that before in previous stuff about where Share was against Surf and the sort of UE stuff. But thinking about where we were, sort of 4.2, 4.1 kind of time frame, we knew we needed to move Share forward. And so we need to sort of recognize what the requirements were for actually taking Share forward as a platform. So it was clearly recognized that we needed to simplify development. I've sort of talked in length about how complex the original sort of Surf paradigms of pages and templates and components and web scripts were. We needed to sort of take a lot of that away, make page development and customizations much simpler. And we also wanted to make it easier to maintain the code that we were providing, because we wanted stuff to be easy to fix in one place and have those changes made pervasively across the application. We knew we needed to improve accessibility. This is a big one. Alfresco is selling a lot into government at the moment, and governments are beginning to mandate, a minimum accessibility requirement. So this was something we really needed to work on. We needed to update our UI automated testing in specifically the sort of at a unit test level. There is sort of various levels of automated testing against the UI going on within Alfresco at the moment. And we wanted to look at specific UI unit testing solutions. We knew we needed to improve customization. I mean, I think we've come a hell of a long way since 4.0 in terms of Share as a platform. And one of the big ones is we wanted to make it easier to reuse the widgets that we write, because if you try to do any customization or to reuse any of the widgets that were written against UE2, you'll find that they're very coarse-grained. We wanted to make widgets smaller and designed for reuse and extensibility. So these were the sort of the primary goals we had in mind. And obviously one of the main things, this has been a bit of a hot topic on blogs and Twitter and stuff recently, but we wanted to make it easier for community and partner contributions back into the platform.
I thought it was interesting. Sorry to interrupt. I thought it was interesting that one of the things you mentioned in your blog post is that this enables a theoretical drag and drop develop environment for Share. Really cool.
Yeah, and I've sort of showed some of that stuff off. I'm not even going to cover that today. There's some cool stuff on blogs and previous sessions that you can take a look at, and we might show a bit more of that again at Summit. But yeah, so I'm going to come on to some of that in a little bit. But the one that's on the screen now, this is the big thing. A lot of people sort of seem to think, just start again, grab a new cutting edge UI tool and just write Share from scratch. But I just don't think people really appreciate just how big Share is. I mean, if you focus on maybe even just a document library, there's so many capabilities it has, and just rewriting wasn't an option. So we had to sort of work from within Share and within Surf and sort of over time begin to evolve the product. So this was the big thing. So this brings us on to Aikau, and so Aikau really is a project named for a framework which brings in a lot of technologies, and it's sort of how we're going to start moving Share forward, and it gives us a lot of benefits in being able to pull in other frameworks, and hopefully it's going to make development faster from here on in. So what is it? So first of all, as we've been saying, it's pronounced Aikau. As Richard was saying, it's named after a sort of famous surfer, because we wanted to have like a surf tie-in, because Aikau is related to surf. And and it builds on the AMD paradigm. Again, I talked about this in depth at Summit last year, and there's blog posts about it. But essentially, AMD stands for asynchronous module definitions. It's a way of breaking up JavaScript into much smaller modules and placing dependencies between them, so that you can you only load in the minimum required amount of JavaScript on the page. But we actually extend that paradigm to include CSS, localization, and HTML, so that one of our widgets becomes like an atomic entity, and when you place dependency on it, it pulls in everything it needs. And all of this dynamic dependency analysis is done via surf, so there's no build step. You just have all your you define your model of widgets, and surf will work out everything it needs and make it available on the page. So we're trying to sort of get down to the minimum number of HTTP requests and the minimum amount of data to deliver over the wire to render a page. So it's very much tied into surf. In theory, you could use it without surf, but you'd have to introduce your own build step if you wanted to use a different web layer. So in terms of AMD, there's really only two games in town. You've got the required JS and you've got Dojo. So we've made a decision to use the Dojo loader, and we're also using Dojo widget templating. Although I will stress, and can't stress this strong enough, you're not tied into using Dojo. If you want to write widgets that use jQuery or any other framework you want, we've used jQuery, UE2, we've used bits of the ACE editors, we've used all sorts of things at the moment. So Dojo will be in there, but you're not restricted to using it in any way. And again,
so to review for a newer web developer like me, what's the AMD paradigm again?
So if you just imagine, like, when you write your JavaScript modules, if you think of it as like a Java set of imports, so you basically say, for this module I require all these other things, and they in turn might require other things. So it just builds up a dependency tree, and it just means that you can write much smaller, modular, as the name would suggest, bits of JavaScript, sort of self-contained entities with a dependency structure. And it's so
what's the acronym expand to?
I believe it's asynchronous module definition. So in theory, what would happen if you were running this without the dependency analysis and the sort of aggregation work that Surf does? It would actually go and fetch the dependencies on demand. But what we do is Surf will actually works out everything you're going to need and builds a single resource for you, so that you end up only. So I think our goal is to get it down to about 4 or 5 HTTP requests, and then it's all like cached on the server, and both it's the file name, the resource names are stamped with an MD5 checksum, so the browser can cache them indefinitely, and it's all kind of I don't want to go too much into that stuff because I feel like I've already talked about it, and I guess a lot of the people watching will have seen the other sessions and they're recorded, etc. So yeah, if you're interested in that, then sure, then ping me some questions. I'll point you in the right direction to read up on that stuff.
It was a good summary, thanks.
Okay, no worries. So what are the benefits of using it? So what we're trying to get to is we really want to maximize code reuse. We want to get to this notion of write once, use everywhere, avoiding copy pasting. That's one of the main things you want to do. You want to write a particular widget. You want to just be able to use it everywhere really easily, and we want to make it easier. We want to sort of have a tiered development approach. So it's not like where you have to understand the depths of the inner workings of Aikau. We want people to be able to come in and just be able to manipulate these JSON models of widgets, without really needing to know CSS or HTML or JavaScript. They just need to basically work with what's there, do some config. That's the basic developer or customizer. And then you've got someone who may want to just develop a new page from an existing widget palette that we already provide. And as Richard was saying, we've actually got a sort of prototype drag and drop page creator. I mean, that's not going to go into the product, but it's going to be something that's there for you to be able to build pages really easily without needing any development skills at all. And then you sort of go down to widget development, where people actually want to build their own widgets or extend the widgets that Alfresco provides. And then you've got right down to sort of the core framework developers, who are likely to be employees who work for Alfresco, who really understand the inner workings of Surf and the core Aikau bits and pieces. And the other thing that we're trying to get to is we want to get to sort of WAI area compliant accessibility. We want to be able to say, if you're using Aikau, you're going to be making accessible pages, and by accessibility we mean good for screen readers, good for people who rely on the keyboard, that kind of stuff. And a lot of this stuff we're actually able to leverage from what Dojo gives us, which is another reason why Dojo is a good choice as the sort of the plumbing, if you like, for some of what's in Aikau.
And to help anybody who sees that as a new acronym, that's kind of the replacement standard for the 503 development standards.
Yeah.
ARIA is accessible rich internet applications, so it's meant for JavaScript sites to make them accessible screen readers.
Yep, that's right. So what else? So yeah, we've got this other concept which I'll come into a bit, which is trying to decouple into widget communication. We want to prevent there being fixed relationships between widgets. And I'll come onto this in a little bit. And finally, we want to abstract widget implementation from page definition. So the idea is, if you write a page definition, it shouldn't be affected by what happens to the widgets. So another way to think of it is, if you define a page using a bunch of widgets, those widgets, even as they evolve, you'll gain the benefit from them. We've sort of seen that in development, that improvements that we make to widgets that are already in existing pages, they naturally gain they gain those benefits, they gain those enhancements. Whereas before, we might have written a page, and that page would have been left to sort of I'm trying to use a nice word, but sort of go stale, if you like, because it's not being updated. But because your page might refer to a widget which is constantly being iterated on, it's constantly staying in line with the latest code, and that sort of allows you to work in a sandbox, if you like. You can work within a widget because it's sort of like a black box, and as long as you honor the sort of inputs and outputs, then which are done over this pub/sub communication layer, then you're not going to break anything. So that brings us on to the sort of this case study, the faceted search. So faceted search is the first page that we've created entirely using Aikau. So the header bar in 4.2 was actually written in Aikau before it was called Aikau, and we've done some other stuff like with site management pages, but that was sort of built into the existing admin console page. So this is the first page from start to finish which is entirely built with Aikau widgets. And it is a very good case study because it demonstrates all of these things I've talked about. The hierarchy of widgets, sort of the benefits of using pub/sub, customization. I'm going to show you some examples of what we've already played around with. Going to show you some accessibility reviews, so you can see again how we're going in that direction, and also how we're able to easily reuse widgets between our pages, and being able to reuse stuff we've written before.
And pub/sub is publish, subscribe.
Yeah, publish, subscribe, publication, subscription. Yeah. So basically, it's one widget can just sort of publishes on a particular topic, and if anything else is subscribing to that topic, it'll be notified. So there's no, it's sort of means there's no fixed relationship. If you publish and no one's subscribing, nothing breaks. And again, if you subscribe and no one publishes to it, nothing breaks. That's the idea, that there's no fixed references. And I'll show you an example of that as we go. So I've got some screenshots here of the page if you're not familiar with it, and I'm going to switch into a browser in a little bit just to show you some stuff working. But just very quickly, this is kind of what the page looks like. And if you want to, to show you how it's sort of chopped up, and we've got widgets that do all sorts of things. So initially we've got some layouts. We've got like a vertical stack of layout widgets, which have within that vertical stack we've got some horizontal widgets, and within those we've got some more, ability to lay things out left and right. Then within the sort of filter or facet section down the left-hand side, we've got a number of these facet filters, and each one of those has widgets which represent individual filters. And then over on the right, for each search result, we've got a number of different widgets for things like the thumbnails, links, properties, that kind of stuff. They're all sort of slightly different. They all typically inherit from one another. But that's kind of the granularity of what you're seeing on the page, and all of these things can be worked with. And as I said, it's all defined in a JSON model, and it's defined which is actually in a web script. So your entire page is defined by a web script, and it's almost entirely done within the JavaScript controller of that web script. There's a single line of HTML in the free marker template. Obviously, any properties you want to use can go into the properties file, but that's largely it. Pretty much everything is done in the JavaScript controller. And what this does, it lends itself to sort of the extension or the customization capabilities that we already have for working with the JavaScript controller. So I started trying to put together a model. Don't worry, you're not supposed to be able to read this. I started trying to build a tree to kind of, of all the nodes that were in the faceted search, and I basically ran out of space, and it just got to the point where I couldn't read it. And this doesn't even show all the widgets, but just to give you an idea that these things sort of fall into a tree-like structure, and all of these things have an ID, and so you can grab any one of these widgets and you could change the config of it, you can remove it, you can add other things in, you can reorder stuff, you can do whatever you want with it, and because they're not fit, there's no fixed relationships, you're not going to break anything. So that again sort of adds stability to what we've done. And in the same way, you could also, if you wanted to, grab all the widgets we've used and just write your own search page, and it'll work fine. And again, I'll show you some examples of that. So in terms of again, with the UE2 widgets that we had, they were very flat, they were very large, and they had no sort of hierarchy. But the Dojo templating structure in the AMD paradigm allows us to build a good hierarchy. So an example of this would be one of the main widgets, which actually shows the search results, is actually sort of this Alf search list widget, and that maintains the sort of overall state of the search, if you like. And originally we had this Alf document list because we were working on, and have been working on, rewriting the document library to use Aikau, and it previously extended the document list, and then we got to the point where we thought, actually, we need to abstract a lot of this code, and so we abstracted it into this hierarchy of widgets. So each widget inherits and it gains or extends, and it provides a bit more functionality. So an Alf list is the most basic thing you could use. Hash list extends that to provide capabilities of managing the content driven from the hash in the browser URL. Sortable paginated list, again, it extends that to provide, as you might guess, built-in sorting and pagination capabilities. And then both the document list and the search list inherit from that, and they add in their own specific capabilities. But when we originally were writing the document list as part of the new document library, that was it was big. It was like, when I say big, it was like 500 lines. The document list in the UE2 one is more like 5,000 lines, so it was smaller than before, but we still felt it was pretty big. So by abstracting it, we're able to, just make everything smaller and neater, and then anyone who just wants basic list capabilities can use Alf list, and that's the general idea, that we can build this kind of hierarchy. And the other neat thing, another example, like for thumbnails, is this concept of mix-ins. So this isn't a proper sort of class diagram or anything, but we've got a thumbnail, and you've got a gallery thumbnail and a small thumbnail which extend from it, and then the search thumbnail extends from the regular thumbnail, and the search gallery thumbnail extends from the gallery thumbnail, and they're different because they both mix in this search thumbnail mix-in module. And mix-in is a bit like it's like a multiple inheritance concept. So you're basically taking the functions that are provided by another module and mixing them into your own one, and that's a really powerful way of being able to share common code when there isn't a direct inheritance structure. So you'll see lots of mix-ins in the code, and this is a good way for us to be able to abstract out function when it's required against multiple modules. So in terms of pub/sub on the faceted search page, so this is just an example of what's going to happen. I can kind of show you this working, but if you imagine we've got these some facet filter widgets, I've just shown 3 as an example here for different facet properties on the page, and we've also got this Alf search list. When the page loads, the facet filters are all publishing on this Alf include facet topic, and it just so happens the Alf search list is subscribing to that same topic. And so what happens is any of these facet, or anything that publishes on that topic, the search list basically says, okay, so whenever I do a search now, I should make a request to facet on that information as well. And what this means is that you can basically add and remove any of these facet filters without breaking the page. So this is going to work really well in the configuration that is coming in a future release. It's not in 5.0a, but you'll see it coming soon, whereby you'll be able to just pick and choose which facets you want. And that can be contextual as well. It'll be based on sites, or you could manage it however you want to. And it also means that you can implement facets using different widgets. Isn't tied to the one that we've done. At the moment, we've got a facet implementation or for rendering Facet data, but you could just go crazy and write your own. And as long as they, you can extend the existing widget we have, and as long as they, publishes on the same topic, then it's all going to work fine. And it just meant over this pub sub mechanism, it was easy to reuse widgets that we had specifically written for the document library. Things like changing the sort, changing the sort order, switching views, which again is something that's I'm going to show in a minute, which we're just sort of playing around with. All these things we can just reuse stuff because they're not tied into a particular page. They're just abstract concepts. And finally, another good example is on the cloud, where we will have the faceted search running. We want to gather analytical information, so we're using Google Analytics, and we want to capture information about what people are faceting on. What are the popular sorts, what are the popular search terms, and because all of this data is driven over this pub sub mechanism, on the cloud we can just add in an additional service, which is like a widget but doesn't present any UI, and we can just subscribe to these topics that it uses, and we can then capture this additional data, and then record it with Google Analytics, which means, and you can do that in other contexts. We've got logging services and things like that. We can very easily change the behavior or add in extra behavior just by subscribing or publishing on particular topics. So it becomes very, very powerful and flexible in as you build and want to customize pages. And we've got this, in terms of debugging, if you run in debug mode, you'll see there's an additional debug menu that pops up, and you can use this to actually see all of the pub sub behavior that's going on. You see the topics that are being fired and the payloads that are flying about. And again, this is another example where I'm not completely happy with the widget that renders this, but I can just go back and iterate over it to make it better, and everything that's using it will still gain the benefit from it. But as you can see here, this is an example where we're publishing on this alpha include facet topic to request that a particular topic is its particular queue name is included in for faceting.
So that doesn't, to get that log, that just shows up in the header bar. You don't need a magic URL like for most of the other configuration stuff in the past.
No. You can just. I'll show you that as well in a second. So actually, let me just switch in and see if I can show you that right now. So if you start, so this is the search page. Hopefully you can see that. I can just refresh. Check I'm still logged in.
If you can increase your font size 2 steps, it'd probably be good.
2 steps. Okay. Let me just do. Okay. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, all right. So if you run in debug mode, then you get this this pub sub. Then basically you can then sort of go in and see exactly what's happened. There's a lot of requests that come in, and like I said, I want to make this so it all collapses down. It's just a debug tool, and we also use it in the unit testing. And you can also do things like switch on various logging, and you can tune your logging preferences by putting like filters in and things like that. And again,
but that can't be used to activate and deactivate modules yet.
No, not at the moment. The module definition. Let me find this a second. I don't mind going off piste, but hopefully we won't run out of time. But this is a kind of cool feature that's there. So if I've started in debug mode, so I can actually disable debug mode here just by. So I'm not restarting the server. So if I then go in and apply that, and then I refresh the page. Hopefully, if it's all working, you'll see that the debug menu's gone. I'm no longer in debug mode, which means I don't get any logging. I don't get, it's the compressed JavaScript rather than the what you call it, the sort of the full fat, the expanded version. But I'm going to switch back into the debug mode. Also, you can see that if you were running with debug disabled, you could actually enable debug as well. So that's kind of a cool feature as well. It just makes it easier to switch in and out of these modes without having to restart the server every time. But yeah,
so very cool. So just to recap, so to get to the module deployment service for Share, you go to Share page modules deploy.
So you go to the webscripts home, which is like the Share service index. Then it's under the module deployment page. I've been meaning to, again, one of these things, I'd love to actually put it properly into the Share admin console, just haven't had. This module deployment page, I think I wrote it like 2 or 3 years ago as like a placeholder. I've just never got around to, never had the chance to update it. But I would love to get it.
But when you're talking about running in Share in debug mode, you're talking about in alf.properties. In your Share module custom config
Yeah,
enabling
yeah,
debug there.
exactly. Yeah, and that just basically using extension modules just to switch the config, because the extensibility supports configuration changes as well now.
Yeah. But
Anyway,
the developer debugs tools, just to make sure people know, is you go to share modules, the share custom config,
yeah,
and what's the name of the property in there you change?
it's client debug, I think, client debug mode enabled, and you just set it to be true or false. But again, and that's effectively all this is doing, but it's doing it dynamically.
Cool.
Right. So I will come back to this to show you some of the search and some of the things we changed in a little while. But I just want to give you a quick idea of the accessibility enhancements. So as I said, we're running typically at the moment we're using this Wave tool, which is a plugin for Firefox, and that's reporting no accessibility areas. We're adding in access key shortcut links. I'll just talk about that in a second. We've got very clearly defined section headings, and we're also using alt text and titles with actual meaningful values. So actually trying to make it useful for screen readers. So if I show you, for example, this is what you see in the Wave report. If you run this in Firefox, so you install the Wave plugin, then you can run various things. And if you can see, it's hard to read, but this bit up here at the top here, this basically says Wave has detected no accessibility errors. Sorry, everything's green, all is good. So first page in Share, which completely ticks accessibility, which is obviously nice. And also, if you look at the outline, if you look at a lot of pages, the outline isn't very clear. But if you imagine seeing this from a screen reader point of view, this gives you a very clear idea of what's on a page. You've got a search page, there's a form, there's a menu, there's a facet menu, there's particular facets, then you've got a results section. So clearly defining what's in the page from the purpose of a screen reader. If you use this another plugin, which is called Fangs, again for Firefox, this basically outputs what a screen reader will see. So the text is probably really hard to read, but what's happening is you can see right straight away as you come in, it's like saying there's some text like jump to search form, Alt plus F, jump to the results, Alt plus R. So immediately people who are visually impaired using a screen reader get this information. They can jump straight to where they want using shortcut keys. And it's all nicely laid out, and it's all, the text is sensibly written, so it's meaningful to someone using a screen reader. So I think we're quite rightly proud of the enhancements we're making. At the moment, as I said, it's in the search page at the moment. But as we continue to move or to migrate Share across to using Aikau, we're gonna see more of these accessibility benefits throughout the application.
Oh, it's really important. It's really great to see you doing the accessibility work now. Just to be clear, though, so in 5.0 and as Aikau gets used more in the product, all those title texts and alt texts are going to be localizable strings, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's one of the, I think accessibility is sort of like it's an art form in many ways. You need to understand it really, because and we're learning all the time about it, and the guys in the engineering team. We've got some very good guys. A guy called Richard Smith, who's come on, joined the team in the last year or so, and he's really into it, and he's done a really good job of pushing it forwards. And it's important for us, and it's as it should be. Yeah, and so we're not saying that Share is completely accessible. That's obviously our goal. It's going to take time, but hopefully this shows that we're starting to move in the right direction, and we're trying to build this into Aikau so that people using the Aikau widgets are getting accessibility right out of the box. So
very cool.
So yeah, so again, the other thing I mentioned about the framework is we want to be able to reuse lots of things. So here's some of the things we want to reuse. We want to use widgets. So in the search page, we've reused views and view controls that we'd already written for the document library, form control stuff, which isn't actually in any proper pages yet, but you may have seen in like the page creator and other examples. We're reusing those. The actions menu, which we extended from the document library. One of the reasons why actions hasn't been present in search previously is because the search the response only contains a fraction of the node data, and so actually what we need to do is make an XHR request to go and get the full node information in order to be able to show what actions you have permissions for and what are applicable to that node type. And so we were able to take what we'd done on the document library, just extend it and add in the XHR capability to go and make that request, again via mix-ins, which can then be used with other action renderer should you wish to take advantage of that if you were building your own. And also the previewer, which again isn't in the 5.0 release, but I'm going to be able to show you here. So it's really easy now just to reuse the previewer, which is this new PDF to JS implementation. So it'll work nicely on your your Apple devices, tablets and the like. So and also menus, which we've done in the header, that's been reused. So all of these things, I'll show you this running live in a second, but just for my backup screenshots, we've got the gallery view, we've got actions, just which are sort of a pop-up, the PDF to JS previewer. All right, let's go back. So I tell you what, let me just very quickly just nip back into this so you can see. So some of these things here. So if I go to a file here, you can see I just pull up the previewer. Can do all this kind of stuff. Look at the pages. Do all this kind of stuff. Very, very neat. Download all. Change the size, all that kind of stuff. So you can do that right in the search. The actions. You can hopefully you'll see it makes an XHR request to go and get this data. So that's kind of cool stuff. If I were to search for something a bit, I think I'm not sure what fit pictures I've got. If I were to go and switch now to the gallery view, obviously not all my thumbnails rendered, but you can see that I've got this ability to view extra data, and it works with infinite scroll, but I can go and get more results if I want to, that kind of stuff. So again, just easily reusing. I don't have to write any extra code. I just grab the widget, the view stuff, the switching stuff that we've done for the document library, and I was just able to drop it straight in. So it's sort of quite powerful stuff, really. And again, I've not really shown you this, the main thing, but the facet stuff. So if I want to find, I think, if I want to find just the videos, I can find those really easily, or just grab me the docs. So I think if you've not seen the search tool, it's definitely worth checking out 5.0a and having a play with it. But I'll show you some other stuff as well in terms of being able to reuse things. So as well as making widgets that you can reuse, we're actually building library files. So when I was at Summit last year, I was talking about this concept of like a hybrid page where we were automatically injecting the header and footer, and those weren't, well, the footer wasn't Aikau, the header was, but it was using the sort of surf component approach. But we're actually providing library files now, which you can just drop into your JavaScript controller, and then you can reuse the functions they provide just to sort of get the header and footers built straight into your page. But not only that, you can take any page definition, such as the faceted search page, and then you can use that in itself as a library file and override the model that it builds. So I was asked as a proof of concept a while ago just to do something very similar. So I wanted to build change the facets that you see on a specific page. So I'm importing the faceted search JavaScript controller, and then what I'm doing is I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm changing the title, and most importantly, I'm actually changing the facet filters. So I'm taking all of the previous ones that are defined, and I'm replacing them with some other ones. Now, there's a bit of a caveat to this, as you'll see on the screenshot, which is kind of here, as you can see, the extra data that's appearing. This is all still running against Solar 1.4. We are in the process of upgrading to Solar 4, which will handle the faceting much better. So as you can see, there's sort of various issues in how it actually comes back with filter values. So you can see that it's not as good as it could be, but it will be better once we get up to Solar 4. But really easy, just reusing an existing page and just changing it to get the behavior that you want to. And there's lots more things we can do with this kind of stuff. So again, this is something I was playing around with. I think this took me like a couple of hours from the idea to actually creating it, this idea of embedding advanced search. I can actually show you that now and again. So you can see it's not in here. If I go to the module deployment, if I apply this module, which I've previously created, and refresh the search page now. As a caveat to this, I'm showing this more from a UI point of view, rather than the back end actually working. But you can see now I've got this extra link that's dropped in, so show advanced search, and then I can switch between particular search forms, and we could build that right in. We haven't decided how we're going to treat advanced search at the moment, but really easy to do. It's not really writing any code. I'm just grabbing the model, sticking a bunch of extra widgets in. All of this, I haven't had to write any JavaScript to do this, this sort of progressive disclosure. It's all done over this pub sub model. And again, really easy to provide. Someone could have provided that as a third party, and then you could just drop that into your, your running share instance and deploy it, or deploy it at startup, and you get new features. Really easy to do. Another example. I haven't actually got an actual example of this, but this concept of, as I said, we've only got this this one filter widget at the moment, which is basically just showing the list of filters for each facet that have come back. But you could easily say you might want to replace them with sliders, maps, tag clouds, whatever you want to do. You just basically need to extend the Alfresco Search Facet Filters widget. There's one function which you need to override, which basically is when you get all the filters back, decide what you do with them. And everything else is handled for you. So this stuff has been written with extending stuff in mind. So the idea would be that you can just reuse our widget and use whatever queue names you want, or someone else could provide widgets that you want to use, or you could write your own. It's we're trying to make it flexible. I think I want to get away from the idea that we're expecting people to have to come in and write really complex code. There will be people who want to do that, and equally there will be people who just want to take stuff off the shelf and make use of it. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to, it's a tough gig trying to make everyone happy, but it's certainly what we've got in mind. I will say, if you look in the code at the moment, that particular function, the process facet filters, when I looked at it this morning, I was like, I'm not adhering to my own guidelines here. It's too long. I want to make the function smaller so that you can, again, just extend even smaller bits of function within that particular widget.
Oh, Dave, I forgot to ask at the beginning, how many more slides do you think you have? There are a bunch of questions, but I want to make sure you get through the introduction.
I can speed up a bit. I'll go very quickly through. I think I've probably got a bit on the unit testing and a bit on some of the best practices, the guidelines we sort of hope people to follow. So not too many more. I'll race through this bit, but I'll get to the end. So we've got, what, 20 minutes left? 10 minutes for questions? Is that good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the unit testing. So we're using a particular framework called intern.io. This provides functional testing across multiple browsers. Basically, we define our test pages as JSON models in exactly the same way as we define our pages. The test scripts themselves are written in JavaScript using intern. We can run these tests against your local machine, against a Vagrant VM, or a remote Selenium grid, e.g. Source Labs, which would mean you get a full spectrum coverage of browsers. At the moment, that's sort of still a work in progress. It sort of conceptually works, but with a few issues with tunneling, which we're trying to resolve. And effectively what you do is you go to a unit test Bootstrap, you load the test page model, it gets posted to Surf. Surf generates the page with all the dependencies built. Your script runs against that page, and then you check the outputs. We're doing code coverage using because all of this stuff, again, we're getting all kind of hip. We're using Node for all this stuff, and we're using a particular module via npm called node coverage. So what we do is we pre-instrument all the, you kind of need to know about code coverage stuff, but pre-instrumenting basically means you take the code and then it gets instrumented, is the technical term, with all the stuff that the coverage can know to recognize the if statements and the code blocks and all that kind of stuff. And then Surf generates aggregated resources against the instrumented code, and then we run the test. Now this is a sample I took the other day. I'm not happy with these results at the moment. I want to get this way higher, but it's showing that we are monitoring where we're going, and typically as we write widgets for features, then we're trying to get those up into the the 90s to the hundreds. So I'm going to try and make sure that our coverage is much better. But this is a really useful way of making identifying dead code, making sure we're testing everything. Like I said, we're going to make this better than it is now. So those aren't the numbers will be getting better. Again, we're using Grunt.
On IRC, they're joking that I encourage you to speed up the testing part of the conversation, just like a real development project.
Yeah, that is actually kind of accurate. Yeah, don't worry about the testing too much. I think what I'd really like to do is some of the other guys in the team, I don't want to steal the thunder of some of the other guys in the team who've done a really good job with this, and I want to encourage them to do either another Tech Talk Live or blogs or something to really get into this, because it's some quite interesting stuff that we've done. But again, we're using Grunt. we sort of actually kick off the unit tests, also for generating the code coverage stuff, and most importantly for controlling Vagrant, which I'm going to talk about in a second, building JS doc and the CI testing. So we've got like CSS linting and JS linting, and actually running the unit test in the background while you work. And we do that against Vagrant. I can talk. I've got my slides out.
And we have a couple of sessions of Summit on this topic. So Michael Suzuki is going to go into some detail along with Will on how to do this. So
he's
cool.
yeah. I'm not sure quite what Will's covering. I'm hoping Will's going to touch on this stuff. Michael's is more to do with the full share sort of functional level testing, whereas this is much more of what we're doing for the
unit test.
There is some kind of overlap, but they don't use quite the same tools as we do. But yeah. I'm just going to kick off this. You won't be able to see this very clearly, but a little video here. Basically, I just want to, you don't need to read what it's saying, but hopefully you'll get an idea. If you've ever used Selenium before, you'll get an idea of what's happening. You kick off the test, a browser fires up, and hopefully you can just about make out that what's happening is we're dumping the JSON model into a page, hitting a submit button, and it's then rendering a page, and that page is then driven by the browser. And you should hopefully see in as well, or at least recognize that pub sub log's there again, because what we're able to do is we're able to because the widgets are treated like this sort of black box with pub sub as the input, we can actually drive them using just by clicking on a button which publishes on a topic they subscribe to, and then we can check the pub sub request that they're actually publishing as expected, or we can visually check the UI on the screen is as we're expecting. So, you probably can't make it out too clearly, but hopefully you can see it's doing a whole bunch of stuff automatically and testing various things, like at the moment it's the table and doing all sorts of interesting bits. And the other nice thing about this, because of the whole decoupling, the widgets are decoupled from, we have these services which typically interact with the back end. So a widget is actually decoupled from data, which means that when we run the unit test, we actually can just use mock data, so we're not dependent upon a repository. In fact, the whole unit test framework runs unauthenticated, and it's just testing the UI portion of it. It's not reliant on any real data. So it's kind of cool. So I won't play the whole video, but you just need to sort of take my word for it that it's working. But we can run this again, not just locally, but we can run it against Vagrant. Vagrant, if you're not familiar, is a way of managing particular virtual machines. We use a Linux virtual machine for a test environment, which enables us to test against Firefox and Chrome. And it allows us to run tests during development. So we're trying to get this system set up, which we're sort of nearly there. I think it's just about working, whereby when you save a file, it's going to kick off the unit tests in the background, and if something fails, you get notified immediately that one of your unit tests is broken. So we're trying to going fast feedback loop as we develop. So that's coming along really well. So I want to get to the questions, obviously. So just some things that I want us to, what you want to be doing. So get familiar with Aikau. This is the direction in which we're heading. Try creating new pages from existing widgets. Try out the page creator tool, which you can find details of on the blogs. Try customize existing pages. Try creating your own widgets or extending widgets. There's a couple of blogs on that. I'm hopefully going to provide some more information soon about documentation. Again, I know documentation isn't as good as it could be. We need to make that better, and we're just trying to improve this all the time. Create your own package, because this is one of the ways in which we can manage contributions much more easily. You can define your own module structure, and then you can easily share packages within the community for people to try things out. Try using test-driven development. We're trying to do this as well. We try and write our unit tests as we write the widget, rather than writing them within the context of the page. Test-driven development, always a good thing. Try and do that. And if you write your own widgets, do try to remember to include the property files for all locales, so that your, any contributions you make are going to work against, for not just your own particular locale. And specifically, these are the goals we're trying to get to. Write short functions that are easy to extend. If you've got behavior which could be abstracted to config, then do that, so that it's easy to change the behavior of a widget in the page model. Don't use closures, because you can't extend a closure. Whereas if you bind, or hitch as it's called in Dojo, to a separate function, then you can override or extend those functions. Don't copy and paste code. This is my pet peeve. Abstract and extend or mix in capabilities, or create utility modules that like static files in Java. That kind of approach. follow the function naming pattern, because this means it will then tie in within the logging capabilities that we provide for sort of the smart logging and filtered logging. Use services for server-side communication rather than making the widget do XHR requests. Go over pub sub to a service, and then your widgets can interchange between different services, and they're not tied to a particular sort of data set. And as I said, we're going to be covering writing widgets at Summit in 2014. I'll be in London. David Webster's going to be covering it in San Francisco, and Kevin Dawes going to be doing sessions at both on this. And there's a simple widget writing example on an old blog post I did a while back, which you can look up. And here's the next steps. So go back over, read the blogs. Hopefully I've not covered too much of what I've previously talked about, but it's definitely worth watching the 2013 Summit recordings, because they touched again on a lot of the technical details, showed things like the page creator, all that kind of stuff. That's much more in depth than I've covered today. Definitely attend Summit 2014. You don't want to miss that. It will be good as ever, and get coding and try it out. We want your feedback with this kind of stuff, good or bad. Mostly good, hopefully, but we'll take constructive criticism. Yeah, so question. I did have a couple of questions. I can take the questions that were on our IRC first, if you like, or I did have some questions that came in offline. I don't know what you'd prefer.
Yeah. So there's one on the Google Plus page from Tahir. He says, are you going to provide the customization script for changing the faucets in the page?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I should point out that I'm working off, I was going to put in a thing about how the development is working within engineering. We've got cycles of development, and I'm actually working off, if you've been monitoring what goes on SVN at the moment, you'll probably see every 3 weeks a big dump of revisions get dumped ahead every 3 weeks, and that's kind of what's happening in engineering. And we're on there's 3 teams working in a sort of iteratively committing to head, and the stuff I showed was off my particular branch. So it's not, what I've showed today isn't going to work off head, but it will work off head in the future, unless you're watching the recording of this at some point in the future, in which case it will work off head. So yeah, I can share that, and again, as I was saying, hopefully you won't really need to when 5.0 gets released, because you'll be able to do all this via config. But if you wanted to switch, and not only that, you'll also, within the config, you'll be able to reference which widget you want to use for displaying the facet. So, but I'm happy to share it as an example. Like I said, that will be more for just inspecting the kind of an example of code, even if you can't deploy it against head at the moment. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
Excellent. There are a couple of questions related to developer experience. One of them is really specific. When you're doing the import statement, that syntax gets picked up by an IDE as being improper. Improper XML. There's no close tag. People suggested, adding, making it proper or changing it to like a require statement. Is there plans to make that play nicer with development tools in the future?
There are no, I can be honest, there's no plans. As you can see, I'm using Sublime, and it doesn't complain about that. If the people are using things like Eclipse, that's an open source project. They could, I don't know. I'm being a bit facetious. They can, no, there aren't plans. It is a pain. Not sure what the best way of dealing with that is. I can maybe take a look if someone wants to raise a Jira issue, and I'll see what I can do about it. But I can't say it would be a massive priority for me, unfortunately.
So Dave will be noodling that over. It'll get fixed during a lunch break one of these days.
Yeah.
So the other question is on the dynamic reload. Andres asked it. Sorry, just scrolling back to find the way he asked it because it was really good. He says that the AMD stuff breaks the dynamic reload that some developers use. Just wondering if there's a way to work around that. Oh, here it is. It breaks live reload for me. Can it be configured to stop doing this during development? David Webster pointed out that it's something you guys have looked at internally. He says he hacked the old stuff to allow live reload, but it doesn't work with the AMD modules.
Right. I'm not familiar with that particular. It's tricky because we obviously work within a particular set of development practices, and that's not something we typically do in that kind of. I'm guessing they're doing it within is that using the Maven SDK or something like that? I'm not sure, but I don't know is the honest answer. I would say we really do want to, I say we, by we I mean the engineering team, really want to improve the overall development experience. We want to improve the tooling, we want to improve the documentation. There's stuff that that I want to make better, but it's, as always, I'm not really in control of my own destiny in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And to a certain extent, where we've got to with Aikau has been, slightly skunk works at the start. It's gained a lot of, starting to gain traction within the company, particularly if it starts to gain traction within the community and with partners, then that will renew pressure on the organization to actually invest in this. And when that happens, then we can start to focus on that kind of stuff. But we're kind of only just really coming out of the point of proving this can do what we claimed it could do. Up until the beginning of this year, really, it was just me doing this kind of stuff, and now it's more like 2 or 3 people, and the people working on it and getting getting the hang of it. So, like I said, we need to gain some traction with this to get that kind of investment. That's just me being honest about where we are with it.
Yeah, well, and our investment in developer tools comes in cycles. So, we just released the 5.0 community. Until the Enterprise Edition release and probably the First Point release after that, most of the engineering team is going to be worried about UI level, polish and cleanup of the feature, the customer facing features in the product. Yeah. But once that's done, I have been working with product management. I expect that API improvements get more prioritization. So yeah, that's the hope anyway.
Yeah, and as we ramp up towards a release, obviously there's pressure on getting those features done, and then once the release is out of the way, there's normally a bit of a lull in which we can focus on looking into these things a bit more. Obviously now we're delivering to the cloud, much more frequently. Then there's maybe that lull isn't going to be as we've experienced in the past. Time will tell. But yeah, it's certainly. Don't for any second, I hope no one thinks that we're happy with this as a developer experience. We do want to make it better, and I can only sympathise with the problems that people have. And like I said, if I was able to work on this on a daily basis, then I would certainly like to do that.
Yeah, well, and I have seen Thomas DeMaio's prioritization list for after 5.0, and API has a line there with specific resources, so I'm hoping that doesn't get changed between now and then.
No.
So API and developer experience, I should say.
Yeah.
They're distinct, but it's the same sort of bucket. So now, of course, there were some questions on the future of Surf, and that was one of the notes you had. You want to spend a moment or two discussing that?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm trying not to repeat myself too much, but basically, Spring, because we'd open sourced this via Spring Source, and they decided they didn't want it anymore, and we took it back in. And the basic problem is that Surf has always been built with Maven, and Alfresco was built with Ant. And what was happening was we were using Surf was built as an artifact, which was then included as a jar within the Ant builds, and so it wasn't easy just to sort of if you wanted to. And what's happened is a single version of Surf supports multiple releases of Alfresco, which is kind of a weird thing. And we actually, once we go fully Maven, which we're very nearly there at the moment, then we can basically just bring Surf back in line as a project or as a set of projects within those individual release branches, and therefore it'll just be like any other project within Alfresco. And then it's unfortunate at the moment that we've just had to, we've had to take Surf and put it on a private branch so no one can see it, which is a real pain at the moment. And we do want to resolve that as quickly as possible. So Surf isn't going anywhere. We're still massively, dependent upon it, and we do continue to develop it. And obviously that's even more hidden because it's on a private branch at the moment. You will always be able to see that the source jars are always included in the in the nightly builds and stuff, so you can always see the latest Surf source. But obviously that's not ideal. You'd rather have it as a visible project on the community SVN. All I can say is, again, it's not a priority, as in it's not something we as in the engineering team need to get done immediately, because we're obviously focusing on 5.0. But I know that once we go fully Maven and everything's built via Maven, then that's going to happen. Then Surf will just become a project in line with the other Alfresco projects. So
Yes.
Don't worry, it's not going anywhere. And we're not going. And the other thing, we're not going to rename any of the packages. That would be silly. It'll still say org, spring source, whatever. It's just going to be part of Alfresco, though.
That's great news, and I believe that with the 5.0a release, we've got Maven integrated in the build system all the way through. So I'm hoping that that should happen within the next few days or weeks.
What, the Surf's going to move in? Well, I think it'd be probably post 5.0, I would say.
So still a couple months out.
Yeah, I think so. Again, I just want to set realistic expectations of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the back-end cleanup and tooling often gets put till after the all hands on deck, get the 5.0 release out.
Yeah, exactly.
Ol pointed out that the Maven SDK for 5.0 is almost ready. It's on GitHub. Feel free to contribute if anybody's interested. And I know that we're getting the documentation up to 5.0. All the new stuff's added. The official documentation is posted, but there's still some specific 5.0 specific. There's some 5.0 specific topics that still need to be posted, like faceted search and things like that. Yeah. So that we are at the top of the hour. Time sure flies when you're sharing good stuff. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Thank you.
So I don't see any last questions. I do want to thank you for your time. This is really important topics, and excited for all the changes. I agree that the development environment isn't where we want it to be, but I think the changes are pretty evident. Things are moving, and even 3 years ago there were a lot of challenges that we've solved. So there's always more work to do, but I think we'd be optimistic about what we've gotten done. And Pat, thank you, pat you on the back for the efforts you put in.
Cool, thank you.
Oh, Ol says that the Maven SDK isn't on GitHub yet, but it's coming soon. So, well, with that, we'll put this one to bed, and we'll move on to the next round of topics. But we are looking forward to your in-depth sessions at Summit, where we'll cover this in more detail. So,
yeah, looking forward to it as well.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.